I initially considered throwing out the simple white envelope that had slipped through the crack of my front door. The stationery was tasteful, with my name printed in neat gold lettering. You are cordially invited to the St. Augustine High School Class of 2004 reunion, where we can reconnect and reminisce in the location where our stories began. The date was 2 weeks away. I wasn't particularly bullied in high school, but I was a shadow in the hallways and invisible. I wasn't eager to relive those times, but I had a weird curiosity that made me wonder if seeing old classmates would bring closure. One day, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting my tie with trembling eyes. It was like crossing a chasm of years and forgetting, even though the school was only a short drive away. Reminiscences, the school's brick facade and Ivy League-covered walls were still prominent. Whispering the long-deceased classmates' secrets, the air was heavy with the smell of floor polish and nostalgia, and the parking lot was sparsely populated with shiny, expensive automobiles that stood in sharp contrast to the dilapidated old sedan I was driving. We were memorialized in inexpensive frames with pictures of previous classes that lined the corridor leading to the auditorium. The auditorium doors creaked open and a wave of laughing welcomed me as I lingered on the class of 2004 portrait, studying faces I had long forgotten. The room was darkly lighted, with overhead lights creating a golden tint, and circular tables were strewn throughout, each covered with black tablecloths. As I entered, I noticed something odd. Everyone looked the same, not in the way that people sometimes say you haven't aged a day, but rather in the literal sense that my classmates looked exactly like they had in 2004, the same haircuts, the same clothes, some even wearing their varsity jackets or cheerleading uniforms. A bar stood at the back, offering free drinks, and a DJ played gentle, nostalgic music. Henry's voice startled me, and I turned to see Amanda Faye, the former prom queen. She was radiant, and her smile was genuine and wide. "You made it," I muttered, trying to hide my uneasiness, because it had been a while. Amanda didn't seem to notice, so she put her arm around me and led me to a table full of people I knew, including Greg, the quarterback, Rachel, the drama queen, and Matt, the class clown. Their faces froze as they greeted me. Frozen in time, the night flew by as people laughed and reminisced. The talks were lively and the drinks were flowing freely, but something was missing beneath the surface. "Where is Mr. Grayson?" I once inquired about our former math teacher, who had been listed as an attendee. The table went silent. Amanda's smile wavered. "Oh, he couldn't make it," she said quickly, "but enough about that." As the evening went on, I became more uneasy, and the faces around me seemed less like real people and more like masks. At one point, I excused myself and wandered the hallways. The school felt eerily empty. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting shadows that seemed to stretch and writhe. As I turned a corner, I noticed a door slightly ajar, and my curiosity got the better of me. The room was dark, lit only by a vending machine's faint light. I observed it when I cautiously entered the air that smelled strongly of mildew. Old yearbooks, each available to the class of 2004, were arranged on a table, and pictures were tacked to a bulletin board on the wall. Each picture had a name underneath it, and my classmates' eyes were lifeless and dreary as they peered back at me. Deceased July 15, 2008. Deceased December 21, 2010. Deceased October 31, 2015. I gasped as I looked across the board and saw that everyone attending the reunion, including me, was included. I turned around as I heard footsteps echoing behind me. Amanda stood with her once bright smile at the doorway. With a sinister sneer, she continued, "You weren't supposed to see this." Her voice was brimming with hate. "What is this?" I stammered, moving away. "This is your reunion," she said, advancing closer. It's a chance to relive the best years of your life. Don't you remember that I'm not dead? I drove here and screamed, trembling, I'm alive. Her laughter was hollow and icy. It's been years since you died, Henry. Do you still remember the accident? Memories of it came flooding back like a tidal wave shattering glass. The scream of tires and the bloody taste in my tongue when I walked out of the lounge, my footsteps echoed in the empty halls, and the laughter from the auditorium grew louder, twisted and warped. When I burst through the doors, the scene had changed. My classmates were no longer human. Their faces were pale, their eyes were black voids. They danced and laughed, their movements jerky and unnatural. Join us. I had died on the way to a job interview in 2012. No, I whispered, clutching my head. This can't be real. It's real, Amanda said softly, and now you're one of us. Henry, in a desperate attempt to flee, I turned and ran when Amanda's voice beckoned. The corridors were twisting and shifting, and the walls were shutting in every door I tried. Eventually, I found myself back in the auditorium, with Amanda standing in the middle with her arms outstretched. I don't know how long I've been here, but time has lost all meaning and I see fresh faces, she added, reiterating, there's no escape. Sometimes others arrive with the same bewilderment I did, so we embrace them warmly and lead them into the never-ending cycle of our reunion. Maybe someone will eventually figure out a way out, but in the meantime, we are stuck here forever, lost in the golden glow of nostalgia, constantly reliving the past. After graduating, I left my hometown and never looked back. It wasn't a particularly difficult period of my life, but I had always felt like an outsider, a sailor in a sea of teen drama and cliques. So when an email inviting me to a high school reunion appeared in my inbox, I nearly deleted it without thinking twice. Reunion night for the St. Mary's Academy class of 2006 is scheduled for the following Friday at the old gymnasium. It's an opportunity to reminisce about the good times and catch up with old friends. I didn't plan to go, but as I sat on my couch that Friday night and stared at my TV's flickering brightness, something pulled at me. I was driving back to St. Mary's Academy, a school nestled at the edge of a forest with Gothic architecture that loomed against the dark sky. The parking lot was full, but the building itself was eerily quiet. I hesitated at the entrance, staring up at the stone gargoyles that flanked the doorway. The air felt heavy, almost oppressive, inside the gym, which was dimly lit with strings of fairy lights draped across the rafters, tables set up in a horseshoe shape, a large area set aside for dancing, and a DJ booth at one end, but the music was little more than a low, menacing hump. No one's faces were blurred together among a group of strangers wearing formal attire, which seemed out of place. A voice dubbed startling me is heard as people in velvet gowns, vintage suits, and even ragged PR dresses arrive. When I turned around, I saw a tall, slender man coming toward me with a smile that stopped short of his eyes. It took me a moment to put Evan there. The class valedictorian, Evan Bishop, had always been witty and sharp, and his grades were flawless, but something about him felt wrong now. Good to see you again, he said, putting a hand on my shoulder. It's been far too long. I nodded, unsure of how to react, and as the night went on, the uneasiness only increased. Every time I approached a group, people mingled their voices low and murmured, and at one point, I noticed someone sitting alone at a table. She had long dark hair that covered her face, but I couldn't place it. I walked over and cleared my throat, saying, "Hello, I know who you are." Without looking up, she said, "I'm sorry, have we met?" Her voice was flat and almost robotic. Her face was pale, her eyes were hollow, and her lips curled into a faint knowing smile. "We all remember you, Daniel, but do you remember us?" For a brief moment, the gym's lights flickered, the tables were swapped out for rows of folding chairs, the walls were stripped bare and the paint was peeling, and my classmates stood still with their faces covered in blank masks. Then the music came back, the lights were steady, and the girl was gone. I stumbled outside, gasping for air, my heart thumping in my chest as I leaned against the cold stone wall. What the hell was going on? I turned to leave, determined to drive away and never look back, but as I arrived at the parking area, my automobile was no longer there. The actual lot was gone, replaced by an overgrown meadow, and the forest with its trees reaching the night sky grew closer. Panic gripped my chest as I turned back to the school, but the door was locked. I screamed and pounded on it, but nobody responded. A soft laugh came from the shadows, and I quickly turned to see Evan standing a short distance away. His smile had widened, and his teeth had become unnaturally sharp. What was going on? I demanded, "Where am I?" "Are you home?" Daniel answered in a cool, smooth voice, "You always were." The ground moved beneath me, and I staggered back. The forest had vanished, and in its place was a huge, barren area with a cemetery that extended as far as I could see in rows of headstones. "Do you remember the fiery fire?" Evan approached, his shape fluttering like a shadow caught in the wind. The words struck me like a sledgehammer, bringing back memories I had long suppressed from my senior year in the gymnasium. As we frantically tried to flee, the crackle of flames and the stench of smoke echoed, and some people blamed you because they didn't make it out. "If you hadn't shut the doors, perhaps more of us would have lived," Evan continued in a voice that was like poison in my ears. I backed off and shook my head, saying that it wasn't my fault and that it was an accident. He repeated his tone, making fun of the fact that 27 lives were lost. I recognized the names on the headstones of my instructors and classmates, and there was a huge stone with only one name in the middle of everything. "Harper, Daniel." I fell to my knees and stared at my name written in stone. "You didn't make it." Daniel. Evan, crouching next to me, said, "You are the reason we are all here, even though none of you did." When I returned to the gym, the graveyard became blurry, the lights flickered crazily, and I was encircled by a strange and twisted multitude of faces. I yelled, but their cries drowned it out, and now I sit here in the gym, surrounded by my sins. Their voices rose in an unholy chorus. "You shut the doors, you left us to die, you deserve this." They say that high school is supposed to be the best time of your life, but for me, it was a black hole, a void I couldn't remember no matter how hard I tried. I could recall vivid details about my childhood and the years that followed, but senior year at Hollow Creek High, nothing. I couldn't even find photos of myself in the yearbook, and my name wasn't mentioned anywhere, as if I'd never existed. So, when I received an invitation to my 20-year class reunion, I almost threw it away. One night at the Hollow Creek High Class of 2004 reunion, we celebrated with old friends and discovered the stories that had been left behind. Although I wanted to ignore it, my curiosity drew me in, so I decided to go. The reunion night was chilly. The type of cold that goes straight to your bones. The school was exactly as I remembered it, peeled brick walls, iron gates, and a faint smell of mildew, but something about it felt off. The parking lot was empty, but the building's lights were on, and the hallway stretched ahead of me with fluorescent lights buzzing faintly. Classrooms lined both sides had their doors closed, and my footsteps echoed the sound uncomfortably loud in the silence. When I arrived at the gym, the double doors opened on their own with a groan. The room was dimly lit, with a weak golden glow spilling from a few flickering chandeliers. A single table stood in the middle, surrounded by empty chairs, and then I saw my classmates. They were standing against the walls, perfectly still, their faces shadowed, and for a moment I wondered if they were mannequins. Tyler, I was startled by the voice and whirled around when a man emerged from the shadows, his face recognizable but warped like an oil-smudged photograph. Mr. Corbin, the air grew heavy, and I found myself struggling to breathe as fragmented images flashed through my mind. I asked in a trembling voice, and he nodded, his lips curving into a smile that didn't feel human. "It's been a long time since you were our principal," I said slowly. "What's going on here? Where is everyone?" "They're here," pointing to the figures along the walls who had been waiting for you. A girl's scream, the smell of smoke, and my voice cracking. What happened to me? Mr. came closer, his eyes glinting in the faint light. "Tyler, your senior year was memorable. You found something that shouldn't have been buried beneath Hollow Creek." I backed away and shook my head. He said, "I don't know what you're talking about." "You will." And then the lights flickered and the gym vanished. I was standing in the school's basement, with crumbling stone walls and a damp, decaying atmosphere. A faint red light pulsed in the distance, and I could hear water dripping. The place felt familiar even though I didn't remember coming here. I took a cautious step forward, the floor slick under my shoes, and as I went deeper into the basement, I noticed symbols on the walls that I couldn't understand but that made me feel dreadful. Then I noticed a huge, rusted iron door covered in chains, with the symbols etched into its surface, glowing faintly. I reached out, trembling, and touched the door. Late nights spent researching during my final year brought up a lot of memories. Hollow Creek's odd past disappearance whispers unusual customs and a hidden mystery beneath the school. I had been obsessive and determined to find the truth, and I had done so by opening the cellar door and the locked object inside. My classmates' shouts rang in my ears, and I saw their twisted faces flashing in my head. When I blinked, I was back in the gym after having released something that I couldn't control while twisted in anguish. In front of me, Mr. Corbin's body flickered like a dying flame. The faces of my students were now apparent as the figures along the walls drew nearer, but their characteristics were incorrect. Mr. Corbin's voice was frigid, and we paid the price. Their eyes were hollow pits, and their mouths were twisted into hideous smiles. The room moved again, and I was sitting at the table in the middle of the gym with my classmates seated around me, their hollow eyes glaring at me. "I didn't intend to," I muttered, tears flowing down my cheeks. "But you did," he replied. "Now you're one of us." I don't know how long I've been here, but the reunion and laughter never stop. However, occasionally when the lights flicker, I see the door again and feel like it's waiting for someone else to open it. Mr. Corbin stood at the head of the table and raised a glass to Tyler. His voice echoed the one who started it, and all the others joined in their laughter at Chilling's symphony.